So we're going to start at Genesis chapter 29 today, or continue, I should say. If we remember where we left off, Jacob was leaving at his mom's request. He was heading to his uncle Laban's place to escape Esau because Esau wanted to kill him because he took the birthright, right? So 29 picks up on that journey. So we'll just start reading here. So Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. And by that, it just means he's out of away from the Canaanites. And he looked and saw a well in the field. And behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, for out of that well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the well's mouth. All right, so he leaves. He goes to the people of the east. He goes to a well. Was it the same well that Abraham's servant went to when they found Rebecca? You don't know, but it certainly could have been. It was in the same area. Um, so he goes to this well, and verse 4, Jacob said to them, "My brethren, where are you from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." And he said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" And they said, "We know him." So he said to them, "Is he well?" And they said, "He is well. And look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep." So if you remember, when Abraham's servant went to the well, he saw Rebekah coming up when he got there. And now Jacob is at the well, and here comes Rachel. All right. Um, there are a couple interesting notes. One is, if we remember, this is 500 and some miles away that Jacob has walked on this journey. And he gets there to the time and place at the time that Rachel is also going to be there, which would suggest providence. Um, Abraham's servant, when he was going to that area before he came to the well, prayed and asked that God would show him who this correct woman would be for him to take back. Jacob did not do that. So we'll notice that there's a little bit of a difference between the two there. So picking back up at verse 7, and he said, "Look, it's still high day. It's not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go feed them." This is Jacob that was talking to them. Remember, he is a good shepherd. Um, but they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep." Now, well, let's read the next couple verses because it will tie together. The stone? Yeah. There could be a lot of reasons. It might be there to keep the sun from getting the water warm. It could be there to keep so that other people would know that that well is claimed by somebody, so they wouldn't steal the water from the well. It could keep animals out of it. I really don't know. Um, verse 9, now while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with his father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother. So we do learn that the stone is not so big that it can't be moved by one person. Jacob moved it himself. So all them other shepherds that were gathered there were not waiting for help to move it. Um, Jacob also noticed that it was high day. It was the middle of the day, which is not when you feed or water the sheep. You do it in the morning and at night, not in the middle of the burning sun, right? So it seems most likely that Rachel, since it says she was a shepherdess, that all of these people worked for Laban and they were waiting on her to get there because she was the owner's daughter. That's what it seems to imply here. They may have been lazy or she may have been late. I'm not sure. Uh, and then we remember this. So there's going to be a lot of comparisons with Jacob here, both backwards and forward. In one in particular to Jesus is from John 10:11, where he says, "I'm the good shepherd." Uh, Jacob also was a shepherd. Rachel is a shepherdess. Jesus, the good shepherd. So picking back up at 11, then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. So when it says he kissed Rachel, that was not a intimate kiss. That was a greeting kiss, cheek cheek, how we talked about before. Okay. Then it came to pass that when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. So, and remember also in this culture, the there's a lot. Dignity means a lot in this culture, right? Adults do not run ever. So when you see it mention a grown man running, it's it's something that's important enough that they don't care about losing the dignity of keeping their robes and everything in place. Okay. Um, and when last time Laban saw Rebecca, which was when Abraham's servant came, was 97 years ago. That's how long ago it had been in between Abraham's servant coming and getting Rebecca and Jacob going back there, which is why he was wondering if he was even still there. Right? Um, Verse 14, Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. So he's on the run. He goes to stay with a relative. Laban says, you're my nephew. Stay with me. Uh, um, it starts out as he just lives with him and he works to earn his keep, as kind of like his chores, right? Even though Jacob's probably 40 or something at this point. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. So a lot of people make a lot about these verses. We're not going to pick on Leah too much. We will hit the main points. Leah's eyes were delicate. Um, Probably means that she had bad eyesight. It could mean that she had delicate eyes, like nice, sweet eyes, but it probably means she had weak eyes. Um, Her name literally means cow, uh, whereas Rachel's name means like a young lamb, right? So there's there's that. Verse 18. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to another man, so stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. So 7 years' wages is so they did normally make an offer to the father of a lady that they would like to marry. Um, yeah, but this was a very expensive. 7 years worth of wages is a quite a large amount of money for a woman. But he did it, and it seemed like only a few days because he loved her. And this takes us back forward again to Ephesians, where Paul says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That seems to be the kind of love that Jacob has for Rachel, although we will see how circumstances kind of uh, cause problems even with that. Um, Verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me, so he's finished off the 7 years. Jacob says to Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, so that I may take her and marry her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. So they're having a wedding feast. Now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to Jacob. Now this is where we start getting the people cross, uh, double crossing each other and breaking deals, and so Laban works or Jacob works 7 years so that he can have Rachel for his wife. After the 7 years are up, Laban tricks him and gives him Leah instead of Rachel. Now they wear wedding veils in those days, and the only person that can take off the wedding veil is the husband. And obviously, there's no electricity, so they have this giant wedding feast, and then they send husband and wife to their private tent. There is no light. He has no idea what's happened until he wakes up. Okay. Um, so Laban and Leah are both involved in this trickery. Okay. Uh, And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. And it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why have you deceived me? So after that night, Jacob and Leah are married. Jacob has no choice in the matter. They're married. Um, so he can't really, he still wants to marry Rachel, but now he already has a wife. So he's going to take another wife, which is not okay, but that's what he wants to do, and that's what he does, and it's going to cause problems. Um, Verse 26, Laban said, it must not be done so in our country to give the younger, but for the firstborn. So he didn't mention that when they made the deal, though, did he? He he tricked him on purpose, and probably because Leah seems like she may not have been a very attractive woman, and also uh, her value would have been on the low side um, because of her weak eyesight. So he would have had a hard time marrying her off. So this is his attempt to unload her with the one that would be easy to marry off, right? Yeah, yeah. It doesn't say how much, but yeah. Um, so the next verse, 27, Laban's telling Jacob, fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years. So the wedding in those times, you had your big wedding feast, and then you have your 7 days for your wedding. Think of it as a honeymoon that you don't go anywhere, right? That's your wedding week. So Laban says, fulfill her wedding week, all right? And then after the honeymoon's over, then you can marry Rachel too, but then you owe me 7 more years, okay? Um, think of how embarrassing that would be for Leah, knowing that she is not the wife that he wants, that Jacob's upset at all for having married her, and that he just wants to get through this week so that he can marry her sister, who he really wants to marry. It's That's tough on everybody there. Um, Verse 28, then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, so he gave him his daughter Rachel as a wife also. And Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Jacob also took Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years. All right. The sisters, sisters might bicker anyways, uh, but these sisters are now both married to the same guy, and they're going to compete for his affection forever now, right? We have the sister that Jacob loves, which is Rachel, and then we have the one, Leah, that's unloved, but we'll see that she's the one that can give him children. So now he's going to be torn between these two.
And this was a week apart.
Married a week apart, yes. Um, Verse 31, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. If we remember, if we go backwards, Rebecca was also barren, which would be Jacob's mom. And if we go backwards again, Sarah was also barren, which would be Isaac's mom, right? So all of the patriarchs married barren women. It's not an accident or a coincidence. It is that God wants them to depend on him for the children. So you'll see that when Abraham and Sarah, instead of taking the maid Hagar and creating an extra wife that they shouldn't have done, so that Ishmael could be born, when they finally trust God for the promise, then Isaac is born, right? And then you see Isaac uh, praying for Rebecca to be able to have children, and then she does, and then she has twins, which is Esau and Jacob. And now we see that Jacob is in a similar situation, but as of this moment, he's not praying to try to help Rachel have children. So he's not following in line there the way that maybe he should be. Um, Verse 32. So Leah conceived and bore a son. And she called his name Reuben, for she said, the Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Reuben means, see, a son. So she is naming. You'll notice all these names tend to be shots at one another in this group of three or five. Um, so Leah has the first child. Even though Jacob loves Rachel more, Leah has the child. So Leah says, "See, I gave you a son." She names him Reuben, pointing out to Jacob that you might not love me, but I can give you a son. And also pointing to Rachel, haha, I gave him a son, right? Um, Now therefore my husband will love me. She thought maybe Jacob would love her since she gave him a son. Verse 33, then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he also therefore has given me this son. And she called his name Simeon, which is like the Hebrew word for heard, like God heard her. Uh, 34. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him three sons. Therefore his name was called Levi. And Levi is like the Hebrew word for attached. Verse 35. And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she stopped bearing. Okay, Judah is like the Hebrew word for praise. So, one thing that we notice out of these first four children that Jacob and Leah have um, is Judah is the line that all of the kings come from throughout all of Israel's history. The kings come from the line of Judah. They have to. King Jesus came from the line of Judah. Okay, the priests all come from the line of Levi. This is Moses and Aaron. They all come from there. Um, At the end of chapter 29, it says, then she stopped bearing. It does not say she became barren or that God stopped her from bearing. She stopped having children. Mostly, it seems like because Jacob was spending all his time in Rachel's tent and not in Leah's tent. Um, and we'll be able to put more of that puzzle together here coming up. Um, Chapter 30, verse 1. Now, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, give me children or I'll die. And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? So Jacob realizes that it's not anything on his side. He's having kids, four of them already. So it's not really his doing that Rachel's not having children. Surely this is God that's doing this. So he's saying, point the finger where it needs to go, but be careful. So, as did Abraham and Sarah, verse 3, Rachel said, here's my maid Bilhah, take her, and she will bear a child, and on my knees I will also may have children by her. So basically, marry this third wife now, and since it's my maid, legally, any child that's born from my servant is my child. So when Bilhah has the baby, Rachel is going to deliver the baby and take that child from birth, and that will be her child then. Okay. Then she gave him Bilhah her maid as wife, and Jacob took her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel says, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan, and Dan is like the Hebrew word for judged. God judged that I could have a son. Verse 7. Then Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, with great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali, which means with wrestlings of God. Um, so as you can see, the Rachel wants these kids, it seems like, solely to win this competition with Leah, right? She's having them with great wrestlings. I've wrestled with my sister, right? She didn't even have the child. Her maid had the child. But she's saying that this is how she's going to beat her sisters by having these children through her maid.
I think it's very interesting that it's exactly what Abraham and Sarah did. I mean,
Exactly.
to the letter, you know.
Yeah.
And
Except for the back and forth. Yeah. With
you
the
know,
giving the
you
maid.
would think they would have learned from history that that does not end well, but yeah, obviously they didn't.
At this point in time, Jacob is still a little bit hard headed. That'll come next week. He'll get that all sorted out. Uh, verse 9. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah. So now we have Leah saying, okay, now Rachel's having children, even though not physically, she's getting the children from her servant. So now I'm never going to get Jacob's attention, even though I gave him 4 sons. Now Rachel's servant's giving him sons. I need to step my game up. So in verse 9, Leah took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob, his wife. So now Jacob's up to 4 wives. Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes. And she called his name Gad, which is like the Hebrew for good fortune. So she called his name Gad. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. So she called his name Asher, which is like the Hebrew for happy. So competition's back on. Leah's now firmly back in the lead. She has her 4 plus her 2 servants. Rachel just has her 2 servants. Verse 14. Remember, Reuben's the oldest. Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field. And in those times, I don't know if they still look at them this way. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But in those times, anyways, they believed mandrakes to be an aphrodisiac. So Reuben was collecting mandrakes for his mom, Leah, to get Jacob's attention. Uh, then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. Remember, Rachel also still wants to have children. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you also take away my son's mandrakes? And Rachel said, therefore, you can have him tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. So Jacob was sold for some mandrakes from Rachel to Leah. What a family. Verse 16. When Jacob came out of the field, remember, Jacob is a shepherd, so he's out with the sheep all day while all this nonsense is going on at home. He comes home in the evening. Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. So Jacob's just been prostituted by one wife to another wife via a son. Uh, verse 17. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a 5th son. Leah said, God has given me my wages because I have given my maid to my husband. So she called his name Issachar, which is like the Hebrew for wages or hire, to hire. Then Leah conceived and bore Jacob a 6th son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun, which is like the Hebrew for honor. And then afterward she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. So we have the one daughter. We have not even any happiness about it. Almost disappointment that there was a daughter mixed in there. But Dinah will come back later. Verse 22. Then God remembered Rachel. God listened to her and opened her womb. So we are up to uh,
6 more.
we're up to 10 children already. 11 children already. And God remembered Rachel. So yeah. Uh, And God listened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. Now, I don't know if it was because of this, if it seemed like she was ungrateful. It seems, at first glance, it looks like she's thankful to God for taking away her reproach and giving her Joseph so she finally has her son. But the fact that she names him wanting more, uh, names him with the idea that now I'm going to have another. This one's not good enough. Now I'm going to have another one. She will have another one, and that next one will kill her. So I don't know if that's because of this or just how it shakes out. I don't know, but we finally have Rachel having a child. It's Joseph, and Joseph will end up being Jacob's favorite because that is the son that comes from his favorite wife. Remember, he's up to 4 wives now, but he only loves one. And this is the son that came from her. Joseph. Okay. And that's going to cause big problems in their house that he loves this one child more than all the rest. We learned before that Isaac loved Esau, right? And Rebekah loved Jacob. And that caused a huge problem. And now we're going to run into that magnified to the tune of 12 children instead of just two. Four wives and 12 children now. Okay. Um, the conflict is going to it's going to carry in for most of their lifetimes. You know? So to recap here, because we're not going to go into uh, Jacob coming back out, going back to the land of Abraham and Isaac. We'll pick that up next week. So we're going to put together our thoughts from this week. Uh, so what it boils down to is Jacob's uncle Laban, his mom's brother, Rebecca's brother, and Laban's daughter Leah tricked Jacob by forcing him to marry Leah when he didn't want to. But Jacob was stuck because he was married to her, but he wanted to marry Rachel, so he took both. And he worked. So he, in essence, worked 14 years just for Rachel, and then had Leah thrown in there. Um, Now he worked 14 years for Rachel, but he got her after 7 years and a week. Uh, the sisters were always in competition with each other. They clearly didn't get along. They wanted Jacob's affection. Uh, this is one of the millions of reasons not to have multiple wives. Every time, and we do find it somewhat often in the Old Testament that these godly men do have multiple wives, but it's never supported, and it always has problems. And I think that's the lesson. All right. Now, would Jacob have been right to divorce Leah because he wanted to marry Rachel? No. It, having two wives doesn't mean you divorce one. And when he got the third wife, that doesn't mean you divorce the proper two. Just stop getting new wives. Stop adding to it. Um, so here's the order of the children that have been born so far and who their mothers would be up to this point. So Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, all from Leah, right? Then Leah's or Rachel's servant Bilhah has Dan and Naphtali, and so then Leah gets back in it with her servant Zilpah for Gad and Asher, and then back to Leah again for Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah, and now finally Rachel for Joseph. All of these children are within that 14 year that well let's be real about it, 7 years, because it was 7 years before he got married. So in this 7 year period we have these 12 children in 7 years, right? You can see that Leah has one child every year. She was she was a production factory. And then he worked in the servants also. But a 7 year period we have 12 children by four women. And this is how God's chosen people get started as a nation, right? So when people say that you're not God doesn't care about you, or you're too bad for God to save, or anything like that, this is a scenario that I don't even think our family tree would get into. And and this is how God chose to start the Jewish nation. So he'll work with any of our circumstances.
The dysfunction in this family makes ours look like a Hallmark card.
It really does. Yeah. Um,
That's bad.
so we will get into next week how Jacob is going to finish out his sentence. I mean, his working for his uncle, and then he's going to head back home, and he's going to have some very interesting conversations on his way back home. In one that he wrestles with God all night long, physically wrestling with the pre-incarnate uh, second person of the Trinity, the image of the invisible God, physically wrestling with him. How tired would that make you? So we'll get into that next week, but we're going to stop here this week. Um, let's pray. Yeah. Father, thank you for uh, showing you what might be some new things in your word today. Ask that you keep us in your studies, not only this, but other places we may be studying as well. Ask you to guide us uh, and keep us in your will, and and convict all of us this week while we go out, to show your love and try to put a stop to all the hatred that Christians are throwing out right now, and show more just love for everybody. And thank you for your love. In Jesus' name, amen.